Welcome to everybody who joined for the keynote speaker. We apologize for being running a little over on our annual meeting, but we're also glad you got to see Jen get her recognition, her well-deserved recognition. And I'm gonna put myself on video just so you can see who's talking. Thanks for joining us. I just want to introduce quickly Hilary Snook. He is the senior scientist with USEPA in the New England Regional Laboratory. He has a bachelor's degree from Montana State University and a master's degree in civil and environmental engineering from Tufts. His work involves the coordination and management of water quality and aquatic biological monitoring surveys for the region, and provides a supporting role for national aquatic resource surveys presently being initiated by the EPA. He's implemented ecological assessments of conditions for wadable streams, large rivers, lakes, and ponds, and near coastal waters for the past 20 years with a focus on development of biological indicators for assessing aquatic resource condition. Harmful algae blooms, monitoring, and education while developing a regional and a national collaborative network on cyanobacteria and its effects. He's spent the past 25 years working on water quality and other hydrologic issues and problems. So Hilary's initial keynote, because we were all going to be in person and we were going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary, was going to be a retrospective, looking back 50 years on what's happened in Maine and New England. How is Maine doing? What does the future look like for Maine? But after talking, after COVID hit and we moved to a webinar series, Hilary was the first to lament not being with you all in person and missing that opportunity to speak with you all in person and meet you at lunch and talk with you in the hall. So he has graciously agreed to come back next year, hoping that we will have an in-person gathering. Save the date, it's June 19th of 2021. So he'll be back, we hope, next year in person to have that experience, and it'll be 50+1. It'll be a 50+1 year retrospective on Maine Lakes. So he decided for this year, he has just an incredible wealth of knowledge and he has so much to talk about. And I saw him give a presentation similar to this, the one he's going to give right now, on lake science at a lake researchers meeting that what we had in January over at LEA. And we both thought this would be a great topic for our audience, something relevant to all of you, ways that allows you, all the people listening today, allows you some ways to get involved. So we switched gears a little bit. So now you get to meet Hilary. He's an incredibly nice guy, so easy to talk to. And, I had met him before January and now he's one of my best friends. So he will be that to you just by giving this presentation. So without further ado, I pass this on to Hilary. Let me stop sharing my screen so he can share his slides. And thank you so much, Hilary, for joining us on a beautiful Saturday morning.
My pleasure. Thank you, Susan. Very flattering introduction, so thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I can't be there in person, but this makes a great substitute, and it certainly is entertaining when you see people working from home in their environments and their kids in the background and the dogs barking and the sirens going off and whatnot. It makes it kind of fun. So let me share here. Okay, get back to the beginning. Okay, from beginning. Everybody see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure I have it. And is there a way to, maybe I could just tuck my video in the corner. I'm going to minimize my video, see if I can here, just so.
Yeah, you're just a little inch box on the side.
Oh, okay. So don't worry about it.
You don't have to worry about it. We want to see your face. We want to see you talk.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So thank you all for taking your time on this beautiful Saturday morning, getting close to summer here, to watch this webinar on citizen science entitled New Opportunities, New Tools, and New Challenges. This is kind of a, thought about this a lot. This is more of a 60,000-foot view of what citizen science is, how we're trying to apply it, kind of the old and the new perspectives on it. So I hope you find it informative and useful. So So basically this presentation over the next few minutes, again, I'll give you a background history, prospects and opportunities for participating in this type of science gathering, some of the tools and technology that's out there today that we can use that wasn't around 15, 20 years ago even, and then some of the challenges, the old and new challenges that we face as we move into this kind of new era of engaging citizens more and more. Let's go back a little bit. The National Geographic Society, I think, defined citizen science very well as a practice of the public participating in and collaborating in scientific research to increase scientific knowledge. And that's kind of a little different than some of these programs we've seen in the past where they've been mainly for educational purposes to educate people about streams and their water bodies and that sort of thing. This is mainly trying to engage the general public at large and citizens to really contribute in a meaningful way with good solid data collection and contributions to the science community. It's not a new concept. It's something that started about 2,000 years ago in China when farmers and the public were trying to track the recurrence and migration of locusts that were affecting their croplands and farmlands. So it's been around for a while. In this country, one of the landmark beginnings was in the 1880s where an individual by the name of Wells Cook, who was an ornithologist teaching Indian schools during that time in Iowa, and as an ornithologist started to collect note cards of when birds were arriving from their migratory routes seasonally and also what birds were sticking around. And over a 20-year period, he gathered over 1 million of these note cards by combining them, asking fellow ornithologists within the region and beyond to collect these cards and send them to him. And so if you can imagine trying to handle 1 million note cards and organizing and gathering that data and putting together, it was quite a challenging endeavor. Today we have better technology, but if you want to look at a really interesting, I think a fascinating little snippet on bird migration between the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere in North America and South America, you should go ahead and click on this link. I'm not going to do it now. I was going to show it and I tried it 2 times yesterday and 2 out of 3 times it crashed my system. So I'm a little nervous jumping in on that, but I'm sure you'll have access to the presentation. It's really fascinating. That is all data that has been collected basically by the public and birders at large. And it makes some really fascinating, gives you some great insights to migratory conditions. The term citizen science was coined by an individual in Europe back in the 90s, but it really hasn't taken off until more recent years, and now it's kind of the buzzword for everything. And I think sometimes it's not really used in its correct context because, again, we look at citizen science as the public participation in the acquisition of scientific data, not just for educational purposes. As we have gone, this is from a group that called SciStarter that does they gather a lot of projects and they put them out for people to use and get information on. And they started tracking back in 2009 the programs that were out there, the projects that were being posted online for people to contribute to the general public. And as you can see, really in 2015, things started to take off. And now today, there are projects, almost an overwhelming amount of projects that the general public can participate in and provide meaningful data to help researchers meet their goals. So just an example from the lake monitoring perspective on programs and the real need for citizen science. This is, I'm sure, nothing that comes as a shock to anybody, but the need for science around lake programs. As an example, Connecticut has over 5,500 square miles of real estate within their borders, and they have over 2,200 lakes and ponds. Their lake monitoring program probably consists of about 6 people within the state agency responsible for ensuring that water quality conditions are met and reaching those water quality, Clean Water Act goals. They have an opportunity to get out on a good year of anywhere from 10 to 20 lakes and take a snapshot on the survey on one of those lakes. So at that rate, it's going to take them over 100 years to complete one round of lake assessments. And we all know that lakes change not only from year to year, but from season to season, and even from day to day and week to week. So one snapshot of one water body every 100 years probably isn't going to serve much really good purpose. If we look at Maine, just in comparison, Maine has 7 times the square mileage in its borders, and it has over 3 times the number of lakes. Probably about the same number of staffing at the state environmental agency level. Fortunately for Maine, they had a lot of forward thinking back in the early 70s, and I'm sure you all know Matt Scott, who really kind of kicked off the monitoring program with volunteer monitors and citizen collection of data. You guys have got a great programs up there, really progressive thinking. It's very exciting to work with you folks. I've really enjoyed it over the years. So keep up that great work. A little historical perspective, most of the citizen science up until those mid-70s and actually more accelerated in the 90s, most of those science efforts of collection with the local public was done within academia and non-governmental organizations such as National Geographic Society. And those data efforts and science efforts were basically more pure science. Their agenda was for the accumulation of scientific data and insights into the science. Starting in the 80s, primarily in the 90s with state and federal efforts, we were driven in from a little different perspective. We knew that, just as in the example I just gave you, that we really needed help in trying to reach the goals of the Clean Water Act and looking to see if waters were swimmable and fishable and good for environmental health, and help to drive policy decisions. At the same time, we were kind of in a flux, I guess, between promoting volunteer efforts and accepting volunteer efforts. There were many state agencies and regular federal agencies that really questioned whether non-professionals could collect the data and had the expertise and knowledge base to really do a good job. And then the decision came, if they did start collecting data, was that data that we could use in reporting out on conditions of our waters and actually use in the decision-making process. And the other end point that's a key point back then is, what was the return of that investment by the stakeholders? Was there anything that got back to them from their efforts? So I like to look at this as those days as someone once said, people serving science the old way. From the volunteers' perspective, there's a lot of, at least through my experience back then, there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm that took place for that first year, that kickoff project that you started. And then it quickly kind of dwindled after a year or so into what I call the 4 stages of grief, denial, anger, depression, and acceptance, where data never got returned to the stakeholders. They never saw the benefits of their efforts. Anger, angst created, and then kind of an acceptance finally that they weren't going to see the data. It was going to be a couple of years down the road before they'd be able to see the data and possibly put it to any use. From the professional level, I want to say I got to move my little thing out of the way. There we go. From the professional level, I think we were viewed often as holding data hostage. That was not necessarily a malicious effort or conscious effort, but from an agency standpoint, oftentimes that data had to be vetted considerably to make sure that all the quality assurance was taken care of, that it was in a database properly, that it was rechecked. From an academic standpoint, often data was held close to the vest until publications were out. That happened at the federal level as well. So that data didn't get turned around and get back to the stakeholders that really were the ones that could benefit the most from that. With that, often there is an unconscious lack of follow-through, mainly because by the time we got through all that in the slow seasons, what used to be slow seasons in the wintertime, we were already gearing up for the next year's surveys and work to follow. So what that all boiled into was basically making it more difficult to recruit people. Attrition rates started to grow. And for the professional that was in charge of trying to get volunteer monitor monitoring programs up and running, it was just exhausting, and you finally just got burnt out. I think that's changed a lot now. We look at it from an entirely new perspective, where the science basically is serving the people. Not only are we collecting science for science sake, but it has spin-offs of being able to educate folks, a refinement in the data collection process, a real focus on good fact-based knowledge, and the ability to, with that good data collection and fact-based knowledge, we can actually invoke good policy changes for the benefit of the resource. Things that we also have found that you guys discovered, I think, back in the 70s, is that there's no substitute for being there with your feet on the ground, observing in person what's going on within your system, and having the local knowledge of knowing where the problem areas are. That's something it took us a while to catch on, but now we feel that that is really, from a regulatory standpoint, environmental standpoint, that is invaluable information. We can't be all places at once. We don't have that knowledge base that you folks that have lived down the lakes all your lives or have camped there all through your summers since youth have that background knowledge, which is so important. The other acknowledgement we've made is that, yes, non-professionals can collect data and can do it well. And that is from all levels, from preschoolers on up through senior citizens. We found that data can have very good integrity and be used for making good decisions. So the non-professionals are very important. And by non-professionals, I mean mainly people that have not been formally trained in the limnological or aquatic science fields. As I go around the region and do bathymetric surveys and other types of work, I always try to engage people that live on the water body so that I can gain that local knowledge, but also to find out what their background is, because I've always found it extremely interesting, the wealth and expertise and intelligence and backgrounds of so many people. It's very diverse and always exciting for me. And finally, that new perspective is that we've finally, I think, come to accept that, yeah, we need your help. We aren't just the crackerjack scientists that can go out there and do everything on our own. So critical needs, kind of from an institutional standpoint, which I think drive it home, is that our resources are shrinking, as always it seems. I do see, my perception is that in the general public mindset, there is an erosion of the scientific method, something we really need to work hard at shoring up and re-solidifying, especially now that fact-based knowledge appears to be being swept aside by kind of emotions and ideologies versus the science. So that's something that really needs to be pushed more and more, I think, that we get back to that and really work hard at keeping that alive. At EPA, as many of you know, our environmental regulatory programs have been whittled down considerably. It makes it extremely challenging to implement some of these large programs that we have, such as the Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, things like that. So this is where citizen scientists and the public at large can really be a driving force and an impetus to promote change. As academics know, and ourselves in federal government, research funds are shrinking daily. What we once thought were nice, substantial research grant funds with a considerable amount of funding, now we work 4 times as hard to get 4 times less funding. It's just the way of the world. So that money has to be spent more wisely, used more efficiently, and really get a lot more mileage out of it. And that's all in the context of the big issues, which some of you talked about earlier. Climate change is a big one. Resource management with some of these big problems like harmful algal blooms that are happening on a global basis now. Resource management with development and waterfront work that's taking place. Agricultural and forest timber management. All big issues that really need attention. So the need is there. So switching gears just a little bit, if you're a science geek, like science of any type or another, I'd just like to give you a kind of a smattering of some of the stuff that is out there. I call them hubs. These are places where people that want to get involved in citizen science projects can go to, and kind of it's basically a science project store where you can just go and look at projects that might interest you and engage and help contribute to the science and to hopefully a better improved outcome for the resource. There's tons of projects out there, almost to the point where it's, to me, it's almost overwhelming. Anything you can think of is probably out there that you can get engaged on. And these are all very important for gathering information from the larger public or crowdsourcing. So I'm going to just go through a couple of these, just to kind of give you the nature of them, maybe save you a little bit of searching on the internet if you're interested. If you've got children at home that are driving you crazy and you need to get them off the video games and out of the house, maybe you can point them to one of these projects, or keep them busy with a different project every single day of the week for the summer. Lots of opportunities. So a couple of things with the opportunities of citizen science, which I think are important to point out that we didn't really have so much before, is the ability now with the data collection technology is not only can we work at a local level or a water body specific level, but we can scale that up to state, regional, national, even global perspectives on issues and problems, which is something we were not able to do before. That to me is really exciting, and it adds to the benefit of really engaging the public. There are also not the limits for temporal considerations like there used to be. Again, if we look at Connecticut, that might be able to do a lake every 100 years if they rotate and be equitable across all the water bodies. With the engagement of citizens and folks like yourselves, you're there, you're on the water body every single day. We could collect data on a regular basis throughout the year, which adds some tremendous insights to the resource. There was a senator from the Chesapeake Bay area. Of course, he had a house on Chesapeake Bay, but every morning he would get up, walk into the water to his waist, and look and see if he could see his toes. And he recorded that data for years and years, and that actually ended up being some pretty valuable information just on the clarity of the water within the Chesapeake. So interesting as far as the temporal observations. Local knowledge, I mentioned that before, you just can't, there's no substitute for that local daily observation, that local knowledge of where your problem areas are and where they're occurring. And then the last thing here is the utility of the scalability of, I call it scalable utility. In the past, we had tried to get volunteers to collect data for state purposes where we used it, or federal purpose for putting a report out or a specific project on something. But it never really got back down to the stakeholder level to be able to use that data for local initiatives and local promotion of best management practices or projects. I think now we have the ability to do that quite easily with the technology that's out there. And we're very mindful of that now. So here is one example of a citizen science project that was started at UC Berkeley back in 2008 by their School of Information. A couple graduate students started it. And basically it was nothing more than collecting observations, taking pictures which are georeferenced and collecting them in one common database. This is iNaturalist. There's hundreds of projects in here. This is mainly just for the collection and curating of images related to flora and fauna of the biota. Our project, we have a couple projects in here ourselves from the region as part of our cyanobacteria monitoring effort. One is called Cyanoscope, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is all crowdsourced, general public out there making observations in their backyard or whether they're on vacation or wherever they happen to be, and crowdsourcing that information. So this here is a map of the project that we started a few years ago called Cyanoscope, basically engaging the public to collect samples on their water bodies where they were suspect that they had an algal bloom of some sort, possibly a cyanobacteria bloom. And it's taken off, not quite as fast as we like, but we're still getting people engaging with it and getting more and more people involved. We had initial response from a lot of people on the West Coast from the California water boards that were engaged And then we started to get smatterings across the globe. We've had submittals from South Korea, New Zealand, Brazil, Mexico, as you can see here, Europe. It's been really fun and interesting. And to get back to that scalable utility, a couple examples I can give on this map are that we got a call or an email with the images that came in from Guatemala a couple of years ago. And they had a couple of fish farms down there where the fish were dying off, and they didn't understand why, but they were seeing these algal blooms that were occurring in their water, in their ponds. So they actually sent the images up, and we were able to identify those images for them that they did indeed have a toxic cyanobacteria, which was likely affecting their fish populations within their farm ponds. Another case that we had of scalable utility going back down to that local level was from a place in Mexico called Tabasco, Mexico, where they had a huge die-off of their manatee population within a specific coastal water body. It's a very high agricultural area. They noticed that they had what they suspected were harmful algal blooms, and they actually sent those images up to us, and we ID'd those for them. And again, those were toxic cyanobacteria. So it's a nice example of how this information can be used both ways, not only up at a larger scale, but also back down to the local use. As you upload images into this program, the nice thing about iNaturalist is when you put these images up there, if you don't know what it is, you can just put it up and say, don't know. And through crowdsourcing and through consensus-based confirmation, other experts in the field will go and look at those images, and they will actually add an ID and say, yes, confirm that this is what it is, what you think it is, or they will give a taxonomic name to it. When you have 3 or more confirmations, it goes from a needs ID level up to a research grade image, which means then it's been verified enough that researchers could use it in their work. So it's a nice tool, and it builds confidence in those people that are out there trying to get engaged. Another hub or store for citizen science projects is called SciStarter. This is a little different than iNaturalist. It's one that's been out there for quite a while. But this is a soup to nuts kind of hub where you can look at projects. So if you're interested more in stargazing, or you're interested in air quality, or you want to look at anything besides bugs and critters and plants, you can certainly go here and find projects that meet your interest that you can contribute to the greater body of research and knowledge. Another project or hub is the federal level. We saw a need for this just a few years ago. EPA is definitely in need of filling some data gaps that are out there, getting the credible science from the public more involved so that we can use that data. And this is now a government website just dedicated to citizen science activities. So one I'll point you to here just as an example is the Did You Feel It on the bottom left side. This is a project for looking at feeling basically earthquakes at a magnitude of magnitude 3 or greater, which is, I guess, the level that you can actually feel it, and reporting this back through a basic app. They found in 2015, they were making comparisons between earthquakes around the country, and they noticed between California's earthquake tracking record that they had a huge spike in the number of earthquakes that were happening in Oklahoma. During this time frame, there's a lot of increased activity taking place in fracking, and a lot of work taking place on deep water underground injection of drilling waste products from the drilling processes there. Once you drill down and pump these fluids, these waste fluids, underneath the aquifers, deep into the ground bedrock, it basically acts as a lubricant to the bedrock that's down there and causes the rocks to slip, that are under stress and pressure, and the earthquakes are a result of it. They have a huge amount of earthquakes now taking place in Oklahoma at minor levels, almost on a regular daily basis. So crowdsourced information that has provided some utility. This is just an example of projects that you can get on the citizenscience.gov page. If you're visiting a national park and want to do some data while you're out hiking around, you can collect data for someone. EPA's got plenty of projects there. Our projects are on there in the region. You have NASA, you have NOAA, US Geological Survey. They're all in here, and they vary, as you can see, quite a bit. Look at Hawaiian volcanic smog So anyway, a host of projects. So this I just thought would be a good time to put in a plug for the citizen science projects that we're working on, actually as part of the Cyanobacteria Monitoring Collaborative, which is a collaborative between all the state agencies, local lake associations around New England, private businesses, and academics. I'm going to be going into our cyanobacteria project in detail on July 10th at 4 p.m. If you want to know more about it, just go to cyanos.org. But thanks to the Lake Stewards of Maine for hosting this. If you're more interested in cyanobacteria and those issues and how to track and monitor for it, certainly try to make that little webinar. All right? Thanks. So what are the new tools that are out there? These actually aren't new tools, but I'm fascinated every day because I just recently got away from my flip phone and got a smartphone, and it's just almost overwhelming the amount of things that are on it, the amount of applications that are there, and the universal tool that you have in the palm of your hand. This has been the game changer in my mind for collecting data from the ordinary citizen. Everybody has the tool. Everybody has the opportunity to use it. And there are enough apps there to satisfy anybody for a lifetime. Other tools that are available from the citizen science perspective, if you go to SciStarter, a lot of these projects do provide tools. Some are free, some you might have to purchase to engage in the project. You can just go to SciStarter and look at all tools, and it'll give you a list from air sensors to inexpensive water quality monitors to simple things like handheld microscopes and that sort of thing. So just kind of an FYI. Example of tools that are used in the citizen science community. This is our Cyanoscope kit, which we developed through our collaborative program. And basically it's all in one package to get out there and monitor the water quality within your lake from the cyanobacteria or harmful algal bloom perspective. So everything is there that you need to get going. Progression of technology, I think through this process, it's hard to keep pace. And just I like to show this example because when we first started our cyanobacteria program, we wanted to put tools in the hands of users and lake people that were inexpensive, that people could do real simple do-it-yourself kind of projects. And this was our first microscope. Basically, it was a laser lens from a laser pointer glued to a plexiglass plate, supported by bolts with wing nuts. And you align your smartphone camera lens over that objective from the laser pointer, and you put a slide underneath on the second plexiglass plate, and then you just adjust the focus with these wing nuts. $2 at the local hardware store, and you got yourself a microscope. So that was our initial one. About a year later, people came up with these, I forget what they're called, opti-clips of some sort, which basically were cradles for your phone that you could put in there, and you could actually clip it onto the objective lens of a microscope and align your camera lens of your smartphone so you could take images from your smartphone. This was, like I said, about a year after our simple microscope. And then finally, we have evolved to this a couple of years later, which is a microscope with a digital optics on it, which can hook up to your tablet, your computer, or your smartphone. It's a battery-operated microscope, so you can take it out on your picnic bench or out on a boat or out in a remote area where you don't have power and actually upload images to your phone and then submit them up to iNaturalist or where you're going to submit them. This rig, all total with the software that goes with it, the microscope, the objective, digital objectives, is less than $120. We almost paid, I think we paid close to $80 or a little more than that for those clip-ons for the microscopes to cradle your phone in. So costs have come down, technology has improved, which has made it a lot of fun and interesting. Here's another tool that was developed through our group. An individual called Nancy Leland kind of invented it, which has been really useful for looking at harmful algal blooms that might be in your water body. Basically, you fill up this tube on the upper left-hand side with water, and you let it sit for about half an hour. And the cyanobacteria, if you have cyanobacteria in there, due to their respiration processes, will become buoyant, float to the surface of this tube. So you've actually formed a mini bloom within this after a period of time. At the same point in time that the bloom is going to the surface, any detritus that is in your sample is going to settle out to the bottom. And along with that, any of the zooplankton which are in your water body are going to head to the clear plastic part of the tube where the sunlight is, because they go towards the light. So you've got a really simple tool that you can separate out your cyanobacteria from and your zooplankton and get some nice microscopic images from that. So kind of a nice little tool that's evolved. A little bit more on the more pricey side of things are these deployable loggers. This is a dissolved oxygen sensor that's deployable, which means you can leave it out attached to something for long periods of time while it continuously logs data. They make these for temperature, other things that are very simple passive monitors that are very pretty inexpensive that you can deploy. These can collect data at basically continuously or 15-minute intervals, half-hour intervals, and go for periods. Often the batteries on something like that at 15-minute intervals will last about 3 months in a water body. So you can just imagine the amount of data that you can accumulate. If you, on the photo on the right, this is my little cartoon of a buoy holding up, those little blue things are dissolved oxygen or temperature probes, daisy chained together and fixed to the bottom. So you can imagine how much data you can collect over a period of time, over a few months with these instruments. So the ability to span that temporal frame is huge. So some of the challenges that we have today with that, if we look at the amounts of data, huge amounts of data that come in. How do we manage it? What are we going to do with it? How do we distill it down in a form that is easily understandable, that we can glean good information out of, and how do we put it to good use? Other challenges that we have with projects like this in the citizen science level are training and recruitment. I don't think that's changed. We still need good training to take place so people are knowledgeable in what they're doing, and keeping attrition rates low, because people get bored after a while with projects. That's just human nature. So how do we keep the inspiration going, if you will? For many of you that live on lakes and have real estate on lakes or recreate on lakes and are passionate about it, that's not a hard issue. But to get the larger public involved sometimes can be still quite challenging, even as it was before. And quality assurance is always a big issue. How do we ensure that the data that is collected is good, that we can use it for regulatory purposes and have confidence that if it's ever contested, that we can back it up and defend it. Networking is important. How do we connect between, and you guys certainly don't have a problem with this, it's obvious, with working with academia and working with local citizens and lake associations, making that flow of communication, that networking, to make sure that you have the applied scientists working on specific areas of expertise, working with you side by side and sharing data and making it work for the common good. The last thing we want to do is end up collecting a lot of data that just documents a decline of a resource and doesn't provide any extra benefit. So EPA has invested quite a bit in citizen science. Quality assurance is our big role here, because most of this data goes up to national reporting, which has to be ensured that it is of the utmost quality. So we have developed, or I should say we, I mean the folks that do the quality assurance within EPA developed this handbook, which is available. If you are applying for federal funds through EPA or other agencies, this is a great handbook to refer to as far as developing a good plan on how the data is set up, how your project is set up, and how you're going to use the data and make sure the data is in good shape and usable. Just a little plug there. And finally, again, getting back to large amounts of data that are coming in, it's with reduced staffing, we need to find ways to better manage that data, put it to good use, turn it around quickly, and get it back to stakeholders that can use it and have it in a form that they can understand it and make good sense of. So some of the tools that are out there are these, what are called data visualization tools or dashboards. This particular one I'm showing here is called a software program called Qlik, Q-L-I-K. There's others out there such as Tableau. And basically what these are is they develop dashboards, which incorporates the data that you have collected and puts it in a displayed format of these visualizations that you can manipulate in real time. So if you look on the left part on this menu list here, you basically build these dashboards or these visualization screens based on selecting whatever you have on the menu on the side here. So you can select bar charts and line charts and graphs and pie charts and scatter plots and statistical box and whiskers, whatever you can dream up, mapping, georeference sites, photo satellite imagery. It's just almost endless. So these are designed, the goal like for the Cyanobacteria Monitoring Collaborative is to get it to a point where we can develop some consistent dashboards, post them up on our webpage so that anyone that's involved in cyanobacteria work, water quality can go to these sites and can query through the data. If you're just interested in dissolved oxygen, you can look at it, and you can look at it either nationally or by the state or just for your own specific water body, or even among various sites, monitoring locations within your water body itself. So that's covered all that spatial temporal span there. So a really powerful tool that we're developing. Lots of folks use it now. And this is an example of a dashboard that was set up for water quality issues under drought conditions. And it just shows you some of the different graphic visualizations that can be designed and displayed. So that's kind of one of my end goals for a lot of the work and projects that we work on, is really to get that data up quickly, know that it's quality assured, and turn it around so that people can access it immediately. Some of our programs, like our phone app that we have for documenting blooms, you can take a picture of that bloom and it will be up on the web page in a matter of minutes, which is exciting. So in summary, with citizen science, there's a ton of opportunities out there, so many of them that it's a little mind-boggling, to say the least. Wide range of tools out there, cell phones being one of the biggest, but lots of other monitors and sensors that are out there. Some of the challenges are, again, the data and the visualization, making sure that the utility is maximized on how we use that data at all different levels. Turnaround times for that data. And then probably the ongoing challenge, which I don't think really has changed, is recruitment, engagement, and sustaining these projects. There are some projects, citizen science projects, that only last maybe a short time span. They'll do a bio blitz, just collect a bunch of data for a weekend and that's it. Others, such as the collaborative effort, we want to look at what's happening not only through a season or on a daily basis, but we want to look what's happening across a region in a country as years go by through trend analysis, as well as what's happening within a particular season. And then the end game, in my mind, is all this sums up to improvement of the environment. How do we make this data useful so that we can promote change? So that's all I have. Hope my time frame, I wasn't tracking my time here, is within what you wanted it to be so people can get outside and enjoy the day, but I'm happy to take any questions that folks have.
Yeah, folks, feel free. Feel free. Thank you, Hilary. That was great, and it was great information. And I know you ended with lakes, but I really appreciated the covering the other realms of citizen science, because I think folks who are interested in lake water quality have a lot of other interests as well. So it was great to be broad, and just want to remind people to check the Lake Stewards of Maine webinars. What do you said the date that you were going to speak? I don't remember. I didn't write it down.
July 10th.
July 10th. If you want to really dig in it's the cyanoscope that you're going to really, is that right? Or is it cyanobacteria?
Yep, around the realm of cyanobacteria. So
if you want to really dig into that, check out Lake Stewards of Maine and join their webinar series. And here
we do have a pilot project which is kicking off this year. If folks are interested, they have those issues that Linda Bacon from Maine DEP and Scott Williams are promoting and engaging in as well. So it may be really useful if you're interested to sit in on that.
Okay, well, we have a few questions that we can answer quickly. We're right at 10:30. We started a little late, so but we still have a pretty good number of participants. I'm sure people are itching to get outside and they're in a lake, get in the water. So we appreciate your patience staying with us. I'll just answer a few. We'll pass you a few more questions that came in. I think one will be easy. What is the name of the cyanobacteria tube that Nancy developed? Is that the cyanoscope?
Actually, no, that little tube that I showed for separating those words, she calls it the Zapper, Z-A-P-P-E-R, and that stands for zooplankton, algae, something. It's an acronym. So,
and is that something that people can purchase?
Yes, they could purchase that on its own. If you go to the webpage, cyanos.org, there's a link there for equipment, and it actually links to Nancy. Nancy is a small business woman's affiliate. She has her own little business, and she develops these. Okay. She sells most stuff at almost cost for her to support the program.
Okay. Somebody asked, what is the app to identify or report blooms?
That's called Bloom Watch, and we're actually right now as we speak, we're getting a new version pushed out. That'll be out hopefully by the end of this month, first part of July. If you go to the cyanos.org webpage, you can download the app for iOS or iPhones.
Great, thank you. What about the QA handbook and the science instruments? Are those all on the webpage, on the EPA webpage? I think he means the QA handbook from EPA.
Yeah, the QA handbook, I would just look that up, do a search for a US EPA quality assurance handbook, and it'll pop up. I don't have it linked to our webpage right now.
Okay. And then the science instruments that go along with that would be on the Cyanos, you just mentioned that website where you get
Cyanos.org.
Cyanos.org. Is
yes,
that where that's where the link to the equipment is?
The tools for the cyano monitoring work are there. They're also listed on SciStarter because they promote our program on SciStarter. They also promote it on iNaturalist and SitSci.org and some others. But yeah, go to the website. That's probably your best bet.
Okay. And we'll post some of this follow-up on our website too. Let's see, I'll take one. There's one more question. And then I just have a quick wrap-up slide for everybody and a few thank yous and reminders. But someone asked, Tammy Warner asked, who are we posting the quality assurance data for? For scientists to provide a greater pool of data, ? How might we use this immediate data to communicate to the general public in a relatable way? Is anyone working on this to your knowledge?
Would you repeat that? I didn't hear all of that.
Sorry, that was a lot of questions at once. So I'll ask it one at a time. Who are we posting the quality assured data for?
Okay.
And is it for scientists to provide a greater pool of data?
Quality assurance data is, if you're engaged in a project and you want to get return on that investment of your time and effort and research that you're doing, that's for yourself as well as an agency to be able to use that data. If it doesn't meet, I've had numerous times people sent in samples and they just weren't labeled right or forms weren't legible. I couldn't use that data. That's just one example. So you've made all that effort and time and energy and training, and what you submitted is not usable. We can't use it. So it's for your benefit, the stakeholder, as well as the agency that's putting it together.
Okay, and the second part of that is how can we out, with lake conservation organizations, how can we use this data to communicate messages to the general public? And is anybody at APA or anyone working on that, sort of translating the science? I think she's getting at translating the science, the nitty gritty, to meaningful information to homeowners and lake users.
That's an excellent and a great question, and we are working on that. Remember those data dashboards I showed? And one of the things that we do with the collaborative is we don't develop these kind of things in a bubble where EPA is knuckling down, just doing it within our own little hub. What I been doing as part of the collaborative is getting people together via regular meetings, and we talk about the development of the data, and we show visualizations, and then we get feedback from the people that are going to use it. So if you say, oh, it would really be nice to see this type of data on this dashboard because we could really use it for meeting with the town on advocating for lake protection, or whatever it happens to be, we will take that definitely into consideration. We would develop those dashboards to support that specific need. That's good utility and scalability of data, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's a lot of educators and Maine Environmental Education Association and lake organizations that would, could use that, could take the data and make use of it. So thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, now we're a little bit over time. I just want to jump back to my slideshow. I have one quick wrap-up slide if I can get it up here. So first of all, I just want to say some thank yous. Thank you to Hilary for all that great information and for joining us on a beautiful Saturday morning and for agreeing to come back next year, hopefully in person. Thank you, Hilary.
Thank you very much.
And again, Lake Stewards of Maine, July 10th, if you want to hear more of the nitty-gritty on the cyanobacteria monitoring.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks. I wanted to thank Jerry Marks, who's the chair of our conference committee, and our whole conference committee for working really hard this spring to basically rejigger our whole conference into this format where we had all our speakers leading up to today, and with Hilary ending as our keynote speaker today. The committee was great. We're going to have some wrap-up meetings and figure out what we might do next year, but again, the save the date, June 19th of 2021 is when we hope to have an in-person conference again. Fingers crossed. If you like things you've heard, if you're not a member, definitely consider joining us. Check out our new website, www.lakes.me. Look over the website. There's lots of buttons for you to donate, join, become a member. We'd love to have more members, and we'd love to have you all as members. We'll send out a recording of Hilary's presentation. Will come out in the next couple of days, and usually we have a post-webinar poll. We are skipping that today, but thank you so much for joining us today. And as we look to the future and look to developing more webinar series, maybe over this coming winter, check back on our website and you'll hear more. I mentioned save the date, and I guess one more shout out to Jen Jesperson for her long tenure and on the board and at the helm of Maine Lakes. So thank you all for coming. I don't know if other board members want to weigh in quickly before we officially say goodbye. If nobody else would like to say anything, I will do the official Maine Lakes goodbye, and thanks for coming and enjoy this gorgeous, gorgeous day.